So this afternoon, we're talking about how we can include everyone in a Make Music Day event. So try to think about what it would be like for you lot as you are planning your events. So this is what stage I would imagine you're at now when you're thinking about, right, what are we going to do? And maybe you've got a very clear plan, but some of you will be right at the beginning of your thinking. So that's a great time to consider inclusion so that you can build it into every element of the event. So like I said in my introduction, I have also created Make Music Day events as well as advised on how to go about creating them. And this is a couple of events that I created in the same year in 2019, just before there were no events. And just as a demonstration, the one on the right is in an inside event in a public space. It is the Scottish Storytelling Centre on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. What you can't see from this picture is if you turn around, there is a cafe. So these people are open into a cafe space, which is then open to the street. So it's a lovely big open space. And this was one of, I think, 6 or 7 groups that performed through the day. And it is a Scottish traditional music learning group. And they came and played for us, which was fab. The one on the left is in a public space. If anyone's been to Edinburgh, you might spot it. It's on the roof of Waverley Station. And that's the North British Hotel in the background. And if you turn around in this picture, you would see the Scott Monument. So we were right on Princes Street with the tour buses going past and everything. So indoor events, outdoor events, public spaces. And I wanted to show you these pictures because I think that's what makes Make Music Day so perfect for thinking about inclusion, because it's the whole purpose of it is to speak to everybody in your community about music, why music is so important for our communities and how everybody should be involved. So I'm just going to define some of the terms for you. What do we mean by accessible and inclusive? Well, this is my definition. I mean, it's very close to lots of other definitions, but you know, you can Google it and come up with lots of different answers. But this is, and I'm thinking about music events. Accessible events are ones where any barriers that would prevent a person attending and fully participating are removed. So what we're looking for are the barriers. What is it that might stop somebody engaging with your activity? An inclusive event is like one step further than that. So as well as people not being stopped from coming or taking part, they are equally included. And I think the second part of this is really important. An inclusive event is where all people are included equally and everyone feels welcome and valued. And for me, that is the sort of next part of how you make people feel that they're really welcome and taking part fully. And it's not just the case of opening the door, it's making sure they can come all the way in and feel like they're part of what's happening. So I talk a lot about barriers. It's really difficult to talk about very specific challenges that people coming to your events might have, because they can be many and many for many different reasons. Our job isn't to try and understand who people are when they come through the door and their identities and what challenges they might face in the rest of their lives. Our job is to think about what is stopping them in the environment we have created from taking part in a way that everybody else is. So we're looking for the barriers, we're looking for those things that are within our control. So there's lots of different things that can stop people fully participating. I've just broken them down into 3 headings, but you can think of many things. So the physical barriers, things like transport, disabled access comes under physical. It's pretty much all of the definition under physical are about disabled access. things about how your venue is laid out, what facilities are in the venue, and what equipment people might need or need to take part. Practical barriers, things like what time it is at or how long it is, timing. The communication before people arrive at an event, so what they need to know and find out before they come, but also how you communicate with people during the event. I've put a comma there because I was obviously going to put 3 other clever ideas, but that's the type of thing. But really importantly, cultural barriers really come into play, I think, particularly with music. And we talk a lot at making music to groups performing or making classical music, which has a very specific specialist language that if you don't know, then you can feel very excluded from. Repertoire can play a part in this. It might be that about a type of repertoire that people don't engage with or maybe feel actively excluded from engaging with because they feel like it's elitist, for example. Or also, I've written something about behaviours there, and the typical one with classical music, right, is when do you clap? But also in a lot of music making events, in concerts and so on, the expectation that you are quiet when you are listening is cultural, right? But it actually didn't always used to be the case. If you went to a classical music concert 300 years ago, they would have been much rowdier and louder and noisier than they are now. But just being able to stay quiet in a music event can be a cultural barrier. So there's lots of things that are going to potentially stop people from engaging. But it's really difficult to think about what every barrier possibly could be, especially when it's so abstract. So I decided not to sort of make a long list of potential barriers and things you could do to overcome them for this event. I really just trying to think of when you're planning an event, what are you, all the sort of steps of planning that you're going through. So I've used the where, when, how, why, what typical questions as headings here. And I think for this event, I'm particularly thinking about what a typical Make Music Day event would and could be like. So first of all, the where. So typically, what's great about Make Music Day and thinking about where you might have an event, it's a brilliant opportunity to get out of traditional music environments, which are brilliant for some purposes, but are not always the best places to think about inclusion for lots of different reasons. So what I liked about the 2 events that I created that I showed you is that they were in public spaces. They were spaces where people already were. And because of the date and because of the type of the activity that works well on Make Music Day, inside and outside spaces are brilliant. And if you're not a group that normally thinks of performing or creating outside events, then this is a great day to consider that and why that might be so great for inclusion and bringing more people to what you're doing. So think about places that people are happy to go to, places that people already know and that they already use. So maybe that is a cultural venue in the centre of your city, or town or small village. It might be that the cultural space is really well used, it's very inclusive, and that is a great place to mount a music event. But that might not be the case in your space, in your community. So have a think about, are there other spaces that people are very happy to go to and that they know and use regularly? And I'll talk about where those might be a bit more. A little word about neutral spaces as well. In some communities, there are spaces which are no-go areas for some communities. And if that is the case for you, then think about, how can you find a neutral space, somewhere that people would be, you wouldn't have to cross a cultural barrier to enter. Or think about places where people already are. We talk about a lot at Make Music Day about using libraries or community centres, going into schools, and just people, so people aren't having to come to you, that you are going to them. And when we're talking about access, certainly for Make Music Day, you don't want to be doing an awful lot of work to make a space accessible, physically accessible. So think about places that are already accessible. It's really tempting, and we see this in Make Music Day sometimes, to think about really wacky alternative spaces, which is brilliant, doing things up mountains or in phone boxes. But if you're trying to make an inclusive event and welcome as many people as possible, then find a space that is already accessible. And anything that has public funding, they'll have thought all of that through for you, and those spaces should be accessible spaces. If you want to check on the access for in a space that you're going to use, things to check on are, is the transport good? Public transport links, are they good? Is there lots of parking if people are going to need to come by car? What's the disabled access like? Do they have toilets? Do they have accessible toilets? Is there access to water and food for people coming? Weather provision. Again, we often see Make Music Day events in outside spaces, parks and bandstands, but that's, is there somewhere people can go if the weather does get really bad? And also quiet spaces are really useful as well. If you are organising an event that is going to be quite long, then an alternative space that people can go to be quiet in is really useful for lots of different people and different reasons. Very quick word about when. I'm talking specifically about inclusive events, and I like daytime for inclusive events because it's safer and easier to travel. If you're trying to get people who organise groups of people, so people who work in day centres or community centres where they might bring groups, they tend to prefer daytime. If you're thinking about public realm spaces where people they tend to be busier during the daytime, shopping centres and so on. And also in Scotland, we always think about warmer, even on the 21st of June, it's warmer during the day. It's not, I put the big question there, what happens when your event is out of normal working hours though? So, for lots of people, a daytime event is exclusive because they're at work or school or they've got other things going on. So really balance the two ideas up. Who is it that you really want to include? Maybe you've got time to do two, one in the day, one in the evening. That would be great. Think about the timing of a shorter event is just generally easier. So, it's just for this day, even, don't break out the Mahler 9, I think I just went to see last week, was it? No, Mahler 5 it was. And an hour and 15 minutes without a break. It was fabulous, but ridiculously long. If it's going to be longer, include breaks and make sure your breaks are long enough as well. So 20 minutes really for breaks should be if you've got a long event, because just to let people have that self-care that they often need to do in breaks. So a bit about what, this is my thinking on, I think, what works well for a Make Music Day event, but also, how to draw in as many people and the diversity of people. Thinking about what might be popular, just thinking about the repertoire you already have. I'm not suggesting you completely change what you normally perform or the type of work you normally do, but out of that normal work and normal repertoire, what will the most amount of people recognize and quickly connect with? I put the word upbeat in earlier and then I took it out again because I like upbeat music but maybe people like the more thoughtful, slower music. So I took that out. But I have suggested you look at the Make Music Day playlist because it's full of well-known tunes and you can have access to free sheet music for those if you wanted to learn something new. I think something participatory is great. Either getting people involved in the activity. So you can tell me later about what type of events you're planning. So is there something, you know, that they can actually make music when they come along? But just encouraging people to enjoy a performance by clapping along, or even bringing lyric sheets, or projecting up lyrics, or even singing a very easy to learn song where you can teach people the lyrics is great, just to really bring people in. Just this word universal, be just a little bit thoughtful about the themes and the lyrics and the cultural context of some of your repertoire. In the UK, it was in the news this very recently that they were going to ask Welsh rugby fans not to sing the song Delilah by Tom Jones. Fantastic song, because it's really quite a violent story about you know, aggressive, unpleasant themes that some people didn't like. Now, it's quite controversial, but you know, it's worth having a think about, is you know, what are the themes and the lyrics that are in those songs? And if you're singing songs from other cultures that are not your own, then just giving a bit of context and knowing a bit of context about where that song comes from, things like that. So who are we going to be trying to reach out to? So we want to really be trying to, if you're thinking of an inclusive event, it's a great opportunity to reach more people and different people than you would normally reach. And that is what I have enjoyed the most about Make Music Day in my time connecting with it. Think about events that might capture passing public. So shopping centres are great. That roof space on the shopping centre showing you earlier was brilliant because it was in a shopping space, but it was also directly onto a street, which was fantastic. I saw a great event last year organised at a school gate, which was brilliant. So there was children who had been learning the fiddle, all standing outside the gate busking as the parents went in and out, which I loved the idea of. I put canal boats because here in Scotland, our sadly just closed Nevis Ensemble did an amazing tour last year where they went all the way around the west coast of Scotland with their street orchestra, and they had a great day on a canal boat performing to people who are walking up and down. And parades are brilliant for that as well, because then you're going through people's environments as well. You could visit people rather than expecting them to come to you. So we see loads of events in care homes on Make Music Day. Live Music Now, one of our great participants across the UK, do a lot of events in care homes. Libraries, and Rob can tell you lots about how Make Music Day gets libraries involved. Great places for music in the daytime. And community centres, any type of community centre brings together any type of community. Can you go in there? If you have a space you want to invite people into, though, that's absolutely fine. But think about how you can broaden out that regular invitation. So if there are people who you know don't normally come to your events, think about or find out about where they might get their information from. So are there notice boards in community centres that you are not pinning your flyers already on? Are there community Facebook pages that you can put those ads on? So can you just broaden out that invite? Also have a think about who could bring a group of people to your event, especially if you thought about having a daytime event. We've seen really successful events where they've linked up with, for example, projects that support refugees. And then one of the workers has brought a group there, or work with disabled people, and they can bring a group, bring them all together. When you're advertising, I've just put a mention of it here, but I can't really go into it. There's just not enough time. There is a bit of thinking about how you can make those adverts really easy to read and understand and access the information. Thinking about what format you give out information in, whether it's in paper flyers or digitally, but ideally both. what inclusive design is like, how people can easily read things, particularly if they, how you write text to be easily read by screen readers, using neutral language so people don't feel excluded by terms that you use. For example, there's loads of good advice on the internet. I'm going to find a good link that you can send out afterwards, Rob. And I will also ask Making Music if we might be able to share one of our resources on inclusive comms if anybody wants to see it, because it's just for members at the moment, but I'm sure they would be happy for me to share some of that with you. So just a little bit more detail about how you might make an event even more inclusive than just thinking about this general good practice. If you're inviting people, so it doesn't always work on Make Music Day. Often the events are created for passing public, for example. So you wouldn't have an opportunity to invite people or to put information up on a website anywhere or in a flyer. But if you are, and you have the opportunity to do this, give clear access information when you're inviting people to come. So you need, once you've thought through or double checked if you've got good transport links and good disabled access and the toilets and the water and the food and all the other things you've thought about, make sure you tell people in advance that all of that is available, and be quite detailed. You can give bus numbers rather than just saying there's a good bus stop close by, or you could say how many toilets they are, or if they are for disabled access, or if there is, for example, a changing places toilet close by. You can ask me about that if you don't know what that means. If you've got the opportunity to ask people in advance if they've got any access requirements, then you can do that. It's a bit trickier on Make Music Day because the events are often unticketed, but ticket sites are useful for that. So even if people are just reserving a free place, then that's a good place to put that on. Or can you just add a contact email somewhere to any information you're giving out in advance? I suggest that it's easier and more helpful if you can just ask a general question about access requirements. So I can suggest some wording if you like, or point you to some, but that says something like, if you have any specific access requirements, please let us know and we will do our best to accommodate them, or we will, contact you, something like that. If you try and produce a tick box questionnaire that covers every eventuality, it could take you a long time. So, do you need this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing? It takes you a long time. I know sometimes you miss people as well. And it's become a generally accepted question to ask. And so people who do have an access requirement will be used to being asked that, and then they'll also be used to giving you a clear answer. So that's just a straightforward and generally effective way. Just opening up a communication between yourself, the organizer, and anybody who's likely to come. Any type of communication is usually the way to deal with it, because requests are very specific person to person. If you can provide adjustments to the activity, then you can let people know in advance, or you can have that communication with people and then make the adjustment. So in the UK, we use this phrase reasonable adjustments when we're talking about inclusion and discrimination as well. You need to make sure that you're making a reasonable adjustment so that anybody who wants to can take part. But the word reasonable is quite important there, because if you're only producing an event for one day or a couple of hours, then you won't be able to make a massive adjustment that would be financially very expensive. But there are plenty of things that you can do, and it's very rare you're asked for a big adjustment. So some examples I've given are if people will find it challenging to read a printed sheet of lyrics, there's other ways you can provide that. So if you can pop it on a digital document and provide a link to the document, or a QR code, even if someone has a smartphone, then they'll be able to take that lyric sheet and adjust it in any way they need to make it readable for them. So they'll be able to have a screen reader read it, they'll be able to translate it into a different language, they'll be able to make it the font bigger themselves, so you can give them the control over that. Offer people a way to take part for a shorter amount of time or in a simpler way, if that's something that would be helpful. And I put a note about interpreters there. With interpreters, if you're fairly sure that the event that you're organising would definitely benefit, there's people that would definitely benefit from having interpreters there, think about how you might make that happen. So if you're specifically creating an event for a community whose first language is not English, or for the deaf community who use BSL, then obviously you'll need to think about that. But that's an expense, and it's also something that can be quite challenging, even if it's not an expense if you're hooking up with a project that might provide that. So providing it if it's not going to be used wouldn't be considered a reasonable adjustment, right? So think about at what point that's going to be actually useful. My most important tip, though, would be, can you have people on the ground at your event whose job it is, voluntary job probably, to include and welcome people, so that can warmly welcome people at the entrance, and big smile and hello, please come in, makes such a massive difference to people engaging. And even if you're outside, actually having people just at the edge of where the activity is happening to encourage people to stay, to encourage them to sit or stand and listen, can make a huge amount of difference to how people feel about coming in. But they're really useful to give the access information that people are going to need as well. So where are the toilets? How do I get onto this higher up space? There is a ramp, but it's round the back, so we can't easily see it. You're going to need somebody there. And how long is this going to be? That's a common question. Who are you? What are you doing? Those are all the kind of questions that people will ask, and that if you don't have someone to give an answer to, they might just walk on by. Okay, so let's thank you everybody who's listening to the recording. We're just going to stop it there.